I found the bank statement on an ordinary Tuesday, folded between the pages of my husband's worn-out notebook. At first, I thought it was a misplaced receipt, the kind of small domestic mistake that could be laughed off. But when I unfolded the paper and saw the account number, the steady rhythm of the kitchen clock stuttered. My hands went cold. His signature, the careful stroke I had traced with my finger 1,000 times, was there beside a balance that made my pulse trip. I thought about the evenings he returned home smelling faintly of cologne, the sudden weekends away, the quiet pauses when I asked where he'd been. This paper answered with silence and arithmetic. Hundreds of thousands, an entire life of secret deposits. I read every line as if it were a language I had failed to learn, decimals that spoke louder than explanations. My voice wanted to call him, to confront him with the trembling intensity of discovery, but instead I sank into the chair like a confession. I froze. I replayed the small betrayals that once seemed trivial. Deleted messages, unexplained receipts, a lipstick stain blamed on an old coat. I remembered a photograph he had shown me, a smile in a place I did not know. Each memory rearranged itself, forming a pattern I had refused to see before. Our life, once a simple map of routines and promises, now showed a shadowed parallel path. The account was not only numbers, it was proof of choices hidden behind ordinary chores. As dusk thickened, I inspected our home as if it were a stage, searching for props of another story. A mug he never used, and a receipt folded into a jacket pocket. The ache in my chest was not merely for money. It was for the patient theft of trust that had crept in unnoticed. I thought of our plans, the house with light in the attic, the savings jar on the fridge, now catalogued against a ledger that excluded me. My hands trembled as suspicion became proof. A new fear rose. What else might be hidden? I felt so small. I opened his phone with a guilt I could not explain. The screen felt like a slab of confession. Messages matched deposits. Names I did not know. Plans written in shorthand, not for me. I scrolled until my vision blurred. Truth arrived like a slow tide rather than a thunderclap. Our wedding vows and the faces that cheered once felt like promises betrayed. My children's laughter drifted from the living room, innocent of the calculus unfolding nearby. I wanted to shout, to rip the house open, but instead I listened to the refrigerator hum and tried to breathe. The ledger suggested an intention kept in silence, savings for another life or payments to someone else. Grief washed over me in waves, each carrying scenes of small tenderness that now felt leased to a stranger. I had to decide, confront him now, or gather proof and plan the careful untangling of our shared life. I folded the statement into the notebook and put it in my bag. Comment if you've ever found a secret and what you did, ... That night, when he came home, I could barely look at him. The sound of his keys clinking on the counter felt like a verdict, each metallic note slicing through my thoughts. He kissed me on the forehead as if nothing had changed, as if my world hadn't cracked open just hours before. I tried to steady my breathing, to speak, to say his name without letting my voice tremble. "How was your day?" he asked, casual, distracted, scrolling through his phone. My eyes searched his face for a flicker of guilt, something that might reveal the weight of what he was hiding. But he smiled, that same familiar, easy smile that once made me feel safe. I wanted to scream, to throw the statement in his face, but fear anchored me. What if I was wrong? What if there was an explanation that would make me look foolish for doubting him? I told myself to wait, to gather more, to not destroy what little calm we had left. Not yet. Over dinner, I watched him carefully. Every gesture, every pause between bites became evidence in my silent trial. The way he avoided my eyes when I mentioned bills. The way his phone lit up face down on the table. The way he suddenly remembered a late meeting the next evening. The man across from me was familiar and foreign, all at once. After he went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at our wedding photo. We looked so happy, two people convinced they were each other's home. I remembered our first apartment, how we ate instant noodles on the floor and laughed about being broke. Back then, he'd sworn that honesty was the only thing that would keep us strong. But now, there was another life he'd built, and I wasn't in it. The thought tore through me. I whispered to myself that maybe love had an expiration date, and I just hadn't read the fine print. The next morning, I decided to confront him. My heart pounded as I watched him tie his shoes, humming under his breath. "I found something," I said, and his hands froze mid-motion. For a second, he didn't look up, just stood there, still as stone. When his eyes finally met mine, they were unreadable. "What do you mean?" he asked, voice calm but thinner than usual. I placed the folded paper on the counter. He looked at it, then at me, then back again. The silence between us stretched until it hurt. He sighed and sat down, his shoulders slumping under a weight I hadn't seen before. "It's not what you think," he began. "But isn't that always how it starts? The excuses, the stories, the half-truths, dressed as explanations." My throat burned as I whispered, "Then tell me what it is. Comment below. What would you have done in that moment?" He stared at the statement for what felt like an eternity, his fingers tracing the edge of the paper as though touching it might erase what it revealed. "It's not what you think," he repeated, his voice softer now, almost trembling. But I could see the storm behind his calm facade. My body felt heavy, my breath shallow. I waited, every second stretching like a thread about to snap. Finally, he spoke. "I opened that account years ago, before us." The words hung between us, too fragile and too sharp at the same time. "It's for someone else," he added, avoiding my gaze. My heart clenched so tightly it hurt to breathe. "Someone else." I repeated the words in my mind until they echoed like screams. "Who?" I demanded. His silence was the answer I feared most. I felt my knees weaken, my fingers trembling as I leaned against the counter. He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back as if his touch might burn. "You owe me the truth," I said, my voice barely holding together. He looked away, his eyes glistening with a guilt that said more than words ever could. After a long pause, he finally muttered a name, one I didn't recognize. "She's not what you think," he said quickly. "It's complicated." My blood ran cold. Complicated. The favorite word of liars and cowards. I wanted to scream, to break something, but tears betrayed me first. "How long?" I asked. He didn't answer. "How long?" I repeated, louder this time. "Years," he said, barely audible. That single word shattered me. Years, while I was building a home, cooking his favorite meals, waiting for him to return from work, he was living another story somewhere else. I felt betrayed not only by his actions, but by time itself. Every anniversary, every laugh, every plan we made now felt contaminated. He tried to explain, said he'd ended it, said he'd wanted to tell me, said he'd been afraid. But fear wasn't an excuse. It was a choice. And he had chosen silence over honesty. I realized then that love can die long before you notice its body. I spent the rest of the day wandering through the house, touching objects that suddenly felt foreign. The couch where we'd watched movies, the bed that now felt like a crime scene. I replayed our years together like a cruel montage, trying to find the moment where everything had started to slip. But betrayal doesn't begin with grand gestures. It starts in whispers, in the quiet corners of deceit. That night, I slept on the couch. I could hear him moving in the bedroom, restless, maybe remorseful, maybe just afraid of losing his comfort. I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up, realizing that the truth I had begged for was now my punishment. I had it, and I couldn't unknow it. Tell me, in the comments, would you forgive someone after discovering something like this? The next morning, the house was heavy with silence. The kind that doesn't rest but lingers, breathing between walls, pressing against your chest. He made coffee like he always did, the smell so familiar it hurt. but when he handed me the cup, I couldn't take it. My hands stayed in my lap, folded tightly to stop their trembling. "We need to talk," he said softly, but his voice cracked on the word talk. I looked at him, this man I had loved for years, now a stranger wearing his face. "No," I replied, "you need to talk. I already listened to your lies." His shoulders sagged. He sat across from me, his hands gripping the mug so tightly I thought it might shatter. "It wasn't love," he whispered, eyes locked on the steam rising from his coffee. "It was guilt. She needed help. I was sending money to her." My breath caught. "Who is she?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated. "My daughter," he said finally, the words trembling in the air. My heart stopped. "Your what?" I felt my voice break. "My daughter," he repeated, quieter this time. "From before us." My mind went blank. A void swallowing every thought. Daughter. The word echoed again and again, louder each time until it was all I could hear. "You have a child? And you hid her from me?" I said, my voice trembling between fury and disbelief. He nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. "She didn't know about me until recently. Her mother passed away and I raised my hand, silencing him. "Stop," I whispered. "Just stop." Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper. I imagined all those nights he came home late, all those vague stories about work trips, and suddenly they had faces, not lovers, but a daughter who had been living a secret life outside mine. I didn't know whether to feel betrayed or heartbroken for him. My world was collapsing, yet some part of me saw the pain in his eyes, the guilt of a man who had built his own prison. I spent the rest of the day in silence. I couldn't cry anymore. The tears had turned into something heavier, exhaustion. My thoughts spiraled between anger and sorrow, between the betrayal and the reason behind it. He had lied, yes, but he had lied to protect something he loved. That paradox tore me apart. I didn't know if I could forgive him, but I also didn't know how to hate him. That night, as I lay awake, I realized forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a war between heart and memory, and mine had just begun. Tell me in the comments, if you discovered your partner had a secret child, would you ever be able to forgive? I spent the next few days moving through the house like a ghost, existing, but not living. Every corner carried his voice. Every room held fragments of the life I thought we had built together. He tried to speak, to explain more, but his words were like static, noise that couldn't reach me anymore. I replayed that one confession endlessly. My daughter. The words twisted around my heart like barbed wire. I imagined her, this unknown child who carried half of the man I loved. How old was she? Did she look like him? Did she know about me? These questions haunted me through sleepless nights. I searched for anger, something clean and sharp. But all I found was grief, deep, suffocating grief for the version of my life that had just died. I wasn't just betrayed by a secret. I was mourning a marriage that no longer existed. One afternoon, curiosity broke through the pain. While he was at work, I opened the drawer where he kept his papers, letters, photos. A young girl with his eyes and a shy smile. The kind of smile he once reserved for me. My chest tightened. She was beautiful, innocent, undeserving of the chaos surrounding her existence. There were cards from birthdays, notes written in uneven handwriting, and one photo that shattered me completely. The two of them together, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, both smiling like family. He had been living two lives, not out of malice perhaps, but out of cowardice, afraid of facing the consequences of truth. Still, the betrayal felt the same. I sat on the floor with those papers spread around me, tears staining the ink. The hardest part wasn't what he'd done, it was realizing how easy it had been for him to hide it. That night, when he came home, I told him I knew. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. Instead, He nodded, eyes red and tired. "She's 14, he said softly. "I didn't know about her until 2 years ago. I didn't know how to tell you. I wanted to scream that love doesn't survive on didn't know how. That truth isn't optional. But my words wouldn't come. I just stood there, trembling, wondering when our lives had become so full of things unsaid. I turned away before he could reach for me. I needed space, not from him, but from the noise of everything breaking inside me. As I closed the bedroom door, I whispered to myself, "Sometimes the truth hurts more than the lie ever could." What about you? Do you think there are secrets that should never be told, no matter the reason? The following morning, I packed a small bag, not because I wanted to leave forever, but because I needed to breathe somewhere he didn't exist. The house felt poisonous. Every chair, every photograph, every wall pulsed with the memory of his deceit. When I told him I was going to my sister's, he didn't fight me. He just nodded, eyes hollow, like he knew resistance would only make it worse. "Please," he said, "don't give up on us." But how do you not give up on something that stopped existing the moment the truth came out? I left without answering, my silence saying everything my heart couldn't. The drive to my sister's was long, and the road blurred through tears I didn't bother to wipe away. I wasn't just escaping him, I was escaping the version of myself that still believed in him. When I arrived, my sister opened the door and saw my face. She didn't ask. She just hugged me, and in that moment, I broke. The tears came like a flood I had held back for too long. Between sobs, I told her everything. The account, the girl, the years of silence. She listened quietly, her hand never leaving mine. "You don't deserve this," she whispered. But that was the problem. I didn't know what I deserved anymore. I had built my life around him, molded my dreams to fit his, and now that foundation was gone. Who was I without him? The question terrified me more than the betrayal itself. I stayed in her guest room that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to find meaning in the cracks of my life. But all I could feel was the dull ache of emptiness, the kind that doesn't scream, it just lingers, quietly draining you. Days passed. He called, he texted, he sent messages saying he loved me, that he wanted me home, that he could explain everything better in person. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every time I thought of his voice, the image of that little girl flashed before me, a living reminder of the life he built outside mine. I told myself I was done, that I would never go back. But at night, lying awake, I still reached for the empty space beside me. Habit is cruel that way. It keeps you missing what you no longer want. I started wondering if forgiveness was a weakness or a form of survival. Could you forgive someone not because they deserved it, but because you couldn't carry the weight anymore? Tell me in the comments, do you believe forgiveness is strength, or just another way to keep the pain alive? On the 7th day, he showed up. I was sitting on the porch of my sister's house, a cup of cold coffee forgotten in my hands, when his car pulled into the driveway. For a second, I thought I was imagining it, but then I saw him step out, tired, pale, and clutching something in his hand. My heart started racing, my body remembering a love my mind was trying to forget. "Please," he said, standing a few feet away, "just listen." My sister stayed inside, watching through the window, ready to intervene if I asked. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo, the same girl from the letters, standing beside a gravestone. "Her mother," he said softly. "She passed from cancer." That's when I found out, his voice cracked. I didn't know she existed before then. I started sending money for her education. I wanted to do the right thing, but I didn't know how to tell you without losing you. The sincerity in his voice twisted my chest. I wanted to believe him, but trust once broken isn't rebuilt with explanations. "You had years to tell me," I said, tears threatening to spill. You watched me plan our future while you hid an entire past." He looked down. "I was scared," he whispered. "I thought I could protect both of you." The words landed heavy between us, the kind of truth that isn't cruel, but still hurts. "I wanted to tell you," he said again. "Every time I saw you laugh, every time I woke up next to you. But then I'd imagine losing you, and I couldn't." My throat tightened. His fear was human, but his choice was unforgivable. I didn't know what to feel: anger, sorrow, or pity. Maybe all three. I turned away, unable to meet his eyes. He stepped closer. "She wants to meet you," he said quietly. The words hit harder than I expected. "Me?" I whispered. He nodded. "She knows about you now. She's been asking." I felt dizzy. I had spent weeks hating this child's existence, but now I pictured her, a girl who'd lost her mother, searching for a father who was barely learning how to exist in two worlds. Part of me wanted to say no, to reject everything he was offering, but another part, the one that still remembered the woman I used to be, wanted to see her, if only to stop the ghost in my mind. "Not today," I said finally, "but maybe one day." He nodded, tears falling freely now. For the first time since that discovery, he didn't try to fix things. He just stood there, broken, waiting. "Would you have agreed to meet her? Or would you have walked away forever?" That night, after he left, I couldn't sleep. His words replayed in my mind like a haunting lullaby. "She wants to meet you." I stared at the ceiling, imagining what that meeting would even look like. Would she hate me for being the woman who unknowingly took her father away? Or would she see me as a stranger intruding on a life that never wanted me there? By morning, I still hadn't decided what to do. My sister tried to help. "Maybe meeting her will give you clarity," she said. "It doesn't mean forgiving him. It just means understanding the whole truth." The idea lingered. For weeks, my pain had been shaped by mystery, faces I didn't know, stories half told. Maybe seeing her would turn those shadows into something real. But part of me was terrified that meeting her would break me further, forcing me to look at the innocent result of his betrayal. Yet another part, quieter, deeper, whispered that perhaps she was hurting too. 2 days later, I texted him a single word. "Okay." He replied instantly, as if he'd been waiting every second for that message. "Tomorrow?" he asked. My hands shook as I typed back, "Tomorrow." The next day, I dressed simply. Jeans, a white blouse, no makeup. I didn't want to hide behind appearances. He picked me up in silence, the air between us heavy with things unsaid. The drive felt endless, but when we finally stopped in front of a small park, I saw her, sitting on a bench, headphones in, legs crossed, a notebook on her lap. She looked up when she noticed us. My breath caught. She had his eyes, the same deep brown, the same cautious warmth. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then she smiled, a nervous, fragile smile, and something inside me softened despite everything. "Hi," she said, her voice trembling just like mine. "I've heard a lot about you." I managed a small smile back. "I've heard about you too." We sat together, awkward at first, until she began to tell me about her school, her dreams, how she loved drawing. Each word chipped away at the anger I'd been holding. She was kind, thoughtful, and so much younger than the pain that had surrounded her name. I realized then that she wasn't the cause of my heartbreak. She was just another victim of his silence. As we parted that day, she hugged me, suddenly, tightly, whispering, "Thank you for coming." I couldn't answer. I just held her, tears falling onto her hair. For the first time in months, the weight in my chest felt a little lighter. "Tell me, could you find compassion for someone tied to the person who broke your heart?" After meeting her, something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. The kind that hurts because it's honest. For days I replayed our conversation. her laughter, her shy glances toward her father, the way she said my name as if testing its sound. I had spent weeks hating her shadow, but now I couldn't stop thinking about her as a person, a girl who'd lost her mother and was only trying to find where she belonged. It was cruel, the way fate had woven our lives together through his lies. I wanted to be angry at her, but I couldn't. Instead, I found myself angry at him for robbing both of us of time to know each other, to build something honest before the truth was poisoned by deceit. That night, I sat in bed, staring at the phone, his last message still unread. "Thank you for doing this. It means more than you know." I didn't reply. Gratitude felt wrong when trust was still shattered. A week passed before he showed up again, unannounced. I found him standing at the doorstep with tired eyes and a folded letter in his hand. "I need you to read this," he said quietly, leaving it on the table before walking back to his car. I waited hours before opening it, afraid of what the paper might hold. Inside, his handwriting trembled across the page. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that everything I've done, wrong or right, was born out of fear, not malice. I should have told you sooner. I see that now. I hurt the two people I love most because I didn't have the courage to be honest." There was more, a paragraph about his daughter, about wanting to make things right, about how he still loved me, but would understand if that love was no longer welcome. I read it twice, my tears smudging the ink, then folded it neatly and set it aside. His pain was real, but so was mine. That night, I took a long walk. The air was cool, the streets quiet except for the distant hum of life going on. I thought about love, how it begins so full of promise and ends with such quiet devastation. I thought about how people don't always betray you out of hate. Sometimes they do it out of fear, cowardice, or confusion. And I thought about how forgiveness doesn't erase pain, it just stops it from spreading further. When I returned home, I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered into the darkness, "Maybe one day I'll forgive you. But not today." And for the first time, that felt like progress. Tell me, do you believe people truly change after breaking someone they claim to love? Weeks passed, and the silence between us became its own language, one filled with questions neither of us dared to ask. He stopped calling as often, maybe realizing that love couldn't be rebuilt through apologies alone. I spent those days rediscovering myself in small, fragile ways. I took long walks in the morning, learned to eat breakfast without waiting for his voice in the kitchen, and filled the empty spaces of the house with quiet music instead of tears. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in fragments. In the mornings, I didn't cry. In the afternoons, when I could look at our wedding photos without breaking. But even as I tried to move forward, the letter stayed in my drawer, a constant reminder of everything unfinished. I read it sometimes, not to feel the pain again, but to remember how close I came to losing myself completely. Then one morning, I received an envelope in the mail. It was from her, his daughter. Inside was a drawing of the three of us, her in the middle, holding both our hands, smiling. The simplicity of it shattered me. There was no anger in her lines, only hope. A child's hope that broken things could be mended if everyone just tried hard enough. I sat on the floor with that drawing in my hands for a long time, tears streaming silently. Maybe healing wasn't about choosing sides. Maybe it was about recognizing that everyone had been wounded in different ways. She had lost her mother, he had lost my trust, and I had lost the version of love I believed in. But maybe, just maybe, something new could grow from the ruins, something less perfect, but more honest. Later that week, I called him. The phone rang longer than usual before he answered, his voice cautious, unsure. "I got her drawing," I said. There was a pause. Then I heard him exhale, shaky and relieved. "She made it for you," he whispered. She said, "You make me want to be better." The words pierced through me. I didn't know what our future would look like. if forgiveness would ever come, or if we'd remain two people bound by a shared past and a scarred love. But I knew one thing: pain, when faced, loses its power. "Maybe we can talk," I said finally. "Not a promise. Not surrender. Just a small step towards something new. Tell me, have you ever tried to rebuild something that was already broken beyond recognition?" When he came over the next day, something in his demeanor had changed. He looked older, as if the weight of every secret he had carried had finally settled onto his shoulders. He didn't bring flowers or empty apologies this time, just himself, quiet and humbled. We sat across from each other in the living room, the same room where I had once laughed until my stomach hurt, where now silence hung between us like smoke. "I don't expect anything," he said after a long pause. "I just want to try, to be honest, this time." His voice trembled, and for the first time, I believed he meant it. Not because his words were perfect, but because they were clumsy, raw, the way truth usually is. I nodded slowly. "Honesty," I whispered. "That's where we should have started. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning." Over the next weeks, we started to talk again. Not as lovers, but as two people learning to coexist within the ruins of what they once built. Sometimes we talked about her, his daughter, how she was adjusting, what she was learning, how she was healing too. Other times, we sat in silence, the kind that didn't hurt anymore, just existed. He began to tell me things I never thought he would. The fear he'd lived with, the guilt that had followed him every day, the sleepless nights wondering when the lie would collapse. And as he spoke, I realized something painful. He wasn't the villain I'd made him out to be. He was a man who had failed, yes, but also one who was trying to rebuild what little he could. Painfully, imperfectly, but trying. I started to write again, journals full of thoughts I couldn't say out loud. One night I wrote, "Healing is not returning to what was lost. It's learning to live without the illusion of perfection." And for the first time, I believed it. I wasn't sure if we'd ever be the same again. Maybe we wouldn't. Maybe we weren't supposed to be. But something in me had changed. The ache that once demanded vengeance now quietly sought peace. Not for him, for me. Because carrying anger was like drinking poison, and I was tired of dying slowly. Tell me, do you think two people can ever rebuild love after it's been completely shattered? Weeks turned into months, and time began to soften the sharp edges of my pain. The wound was still there, but it no longer bled every time I thought of him. We started meeting occasionally, sometimes for coffee, sometimes just to talk about life, about her, about how strange it felt to rebuild something when the foundation had already cracked. Each conversation was cautious, like walking across a frozen lake, afraid one wrong step would send us plunging back into the cold. But little by little, the ice held. There were no declarations of love, no promises of forever, just two people learning to exist honestly for the first time. It was fragile, yes, but it was real. I began to realize that forgiveness wasn't a single moment of grace. It was 1,000 quiet decisions to let go of anger, one day at a time. One afternoon, he invited me to see her again. "She's been asking about you," he said softly, as though afraid I'd refuse. But I didn't. When I arrived, she ran to me with a drawing in her hands, the three of us again. But this time, standing under a tree, smiling. "This is our second chance," she said shyly. The innocence in her voice broke me. I knelt and hugged her, feeling the kind of warmth that can only come from forgiveness. Later, as the sun set, we sat together, the three of us, watching the sky fade into gold. There was peace there, small but undeniable. He looked at me, eyes full of gratitude and regret. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "Maybe not," I replied gently, "but that's what makes it forgiveness." That night, I returned home with a strange sense of calm. I didn't know what would happen next, if we would ever love each other the same way again, or if we'd simply learned to coexist as broken people who chose compassion over bitterness. But I did know one thing. I was no longer a victim of his choices. I had reclaimed my voice, my strength, my story. Pain had carved something deep inside me. Not emptiness, but space for something new. Maybe not love, not yet, but peace. And peace, I realized, is sometimes the most powerful kind of love there is. Months slipped by quietly, and for the first time in years, life felt still. Not perfect, but bearable. I started to rebuild the parts of myself I had neglected for so long. I joined a small art class, began volunteering at a local shelter, and learned to enjoy my own company again. The silence that once tormented me had transformed into peace. Sometimes, when I passed by the park where I met her for the first time, I'd stop for a moment and smile. There was a time when that place represented betrayal. Now, it symbolized something different: resilience. I realized I didn't need closure from him anymore. Closure came when I understood that forgiveness was never for the one who caused the pain. It was for the one who carried it. I had stopped carrying it. And in that release, I had found myself again. One evening, I received a call from him. His voice was calm, almost hesitant. "I wanted to tell you," he said. "She got accepted into an art program. She wanted me to tell you first." My chest warmed unexpectedly. "That's wonderful," I replied, and I meant it. We spoke for a while, not as lovers, not even as exes, but as two people who shared a piece of the same story. Before hanging up, he said something that lingered long after the call ended. "Thank you for not hating me." I didn't answer right away. Hate had long ago lost its grip on me. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "I just learned to love myself more." The line went silent, but I could feel the weight of those words settling between us like a fragile peace treaty. That night, I looked out the window and thought about how much had changed. The woman who once broke under the weight of betrayal was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, not because she avoided pain, but because she faced it and refused to let it define her. I smiled, whispering to the night, "Sometimes losing someone isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of yours." And for the first time, I believed that fully. Life continued, not in grand gestures, but in small, almost invisible ways. The sun rose, bills were paid, dishes washed. The quiet rhythm of existence resumed its steady beat. But inside, I was different. I no longer woke up searching for him beside me, nor did I flinch at the thought of his betrayal. The pain had faded into a dull scar, a reminder of what I survived rather than what I lost. One evening, as I walked through the park, I saw families laughing, couples holding hands, the world spinning in its endless motion. For the first time, I didn't feel envy. I felt gratitude. Gratitude that I had been broken, because only through breaking had I learned what I was truly made of. Strength isn't something you find. It's something you uncover when life leaves you no choice. He still called sometimes, and I still answered. Our conversations were softer now, stripped of the weight of the past. He told me about her, how she was painting, how she talked about college, how she sometimes asked about me. I smiled through the phone, realizing that maybe love could exist in different forms. Not romantic, not perfect, but genuine. I didn't love him the way I once did, but I didn't hate him either. He had become a chapter in my story, a painful one, but necessary. We promised to stay in touch, not out of obligation, but because some connections, no matter how damaged, never truly disappear. That night, I stood before the mirror and looked at myself, really looked. I saw the same eyes, but they no longer held fear. I saw the same face, but it carried wisdom born of pain. I whispered, "You made it," and for the first time, I believed it. My life wasn't what I had planned, but maybe it was better, because it was mine again. Betrayal had taken so much, but it had also given me something I didn't know I'd lost, myself. I smiled, wiped a tear, and turned off the light. It has been over a year now since the day I found that folded piece of paper, the day my world shattered and began again. I often think about how fragile life can be, how a single truth can break everything you thought was unshakable. But now, when I look back, I no longer see that day as the end of something. I see it as the beginning of who I was meant to become. The woman I was before, soft, trusting, living in someone else's shadow, she's gone. In her place stands someone who knows the value of truth, even when it hurts. Someone who understands that peace doesn't come from others, but from within. Pain was my greatest teacher, and though I wouldn't wish it on anyone, I can't deny that it shaped me into something stronger, wiser, more alive. He and I still speak occasionally, our conversations brief but kind. He's rebuilding his relationship with her, and I'm proud of that. Proud that he's learning to face the consequences of his choices. As for me, I found a new rhythm to my life. I travel sometimes, I paint, I write. I've met new people, not searching for love, but open to it if it finds me. There are days when loneliness creeps in, but it doesn't scare me anymore. I've learned that solitude isn't emptiness, it's freedom. Freedom from pretending, from pain, from the constant need to be needed. I've finally learned to be enough on my own. Sometimes, late at night, I take that old bank statement from the drawer, not to relive the hurt, but to remind myself of how far I've come. That piece of paper once represented betrayal. Now, it represents rebirth. I smile, fold it carefully, and put it away again. Life has a strange way of healing, not by erasing what happened, but by transforming it into strength. The truth destroyed me once, but it also rebuilt me. I survived. And in that survival, I found something greater than love, greater than pain. I found peace. If you've ever been broken but found your way back to yourself, tell me in the comments, what did that journey teach you about who you truly are?